It's time to riff on.
All right.
Why not, huh?
We should.
My name's Eric D.
I'm Andrew James.
And we figured, hey, you're with us, we're with you. It's time to riff on. Thank you for tuning into the podcast. Hopefully you had a chance to listen to episode, we call it 000.
That's it, a collector's edition, so we're not sure how available that's going to be.
Well, the nice thing about the internet is it's there for posterity, right?
It sure is.
Wait, are we talking about my posterior?
I don't know, but I feel like you have more beer than me right now.
I'm sorry. Let me fill that up here. So.
Oh, should we give a shout? Let's give a shout out to the last Vermont beer podcast.
Which one is that?
That was Matt Gadwa.
Two Brews.
Oh, Two Brews. That's the one.
All right, man.
Yeah. Oh, we should raise our glasses.
Cheers.
Cheers to Two Brews. Those guys aren't doing it anymore.
To the Two Brews guys. Yeah, they were fantastic. Silas joined in there in the ranks.
Yes.
Matt. And was it Chris?
I think it was Chris. I'm not sure. I listened to all of those. Names. You know what? The nice thing is you can actually go back and listen to those.
The internet. Posterity. It all goes back to posterity.
Oh, man. At some point, we're going to have to get into the posterity of your CD collection that's sitting right here behind
So it's very nice that you just Vanna Whited my CD collection, and no one knows that you just Vanna Whited my CD collection.
Man. You know, one of my favorite podcasts is Barstool Sports. They do the Pardon My Take, and they do a bad radio segment where they just Vanna White everything.
This is fantastic. This is really good. And I just Vanna Whited my beer.
Nobody knows what you're talking about. This is fantastic. Are you talking about my socks again?
I'm not talking about your socks. Those are nice socks you're wearing, by the way.
No holes.
No holes. She let you out of the house, huh? So we were going to riff on craft beer, Vermont beer, for episode 001 because it is what made Eric D. and Andrew James' friendship move to the next level.
Right. And at that point, we were just hop snob and one who sees dimly.
Just two ships passing in the night.
In the Twitter sphere.
Back then, it was in the 140.
The 140. Oh, yeah. We're not in the 140 anymore.
This is what's going to happen with this podcast. We're going to riff on one subject, and we're going to go off onto 4 different subjects just in the first few minutes.
It's important because, you know what? Everything is intertwined, man.
Yeah, man.
Can't help it.
So, it's true. We were friends, let's say, loosely speaking. We both went to Milton High School, as we talked about in 000, but really what brought the two of us together to really hang out and chat a lot was the Vermont beer scene.
And the social media behind it.
And the social media and the marketing behind it. And the scary thing is that's been, 4 years now?
Has been, yeah. At least 4 years.
And the Vermont beer scene has gone crazy over the last 4 years.
It's exploded. It's been ridiculous.
But before we talk about the last 4 years, we can go back in time. So
let's go back in time.
Just like that, we're back in time. So you're about to turn 40.
I will turn 40 in July, yeah.
All right. I'll be 43 in August. So we've got almost 3 years between us, but not substantial. But
we did overlap high school together.
We did. It was, one of those things. I was a senior and you're one of those peon freshmen, right?
And you don't remember me at all. And that's
of course
fine.
Not.
I'm not hurt. I bring it up all the time, but I'm not hurt.
Everyone knows when you're a senior in high school, all you see is your ass out the door.
Well, I married a freshman. Not when she was a freshman. After she graduated. Because Elizabeth and I went to high school together as well.
Hey, I've been saying this for a while now. I remember, not that I didn't drink beer before I was 21, but very few and far between. And I didn't have a fake ID. I didn't go out to clubs. But since I turned 21, I have been really a craft beer drinker. I can definitely say that I've been going to the Vermont Pub and Brewery since 1996.
Since 1996, and you're going to throw some Long Trail in there?
Oh, Magic Hat?
Magic Hat?
I remember drinking Catamount.
Oh, Catamount, yeah.
So what about you? I mean, so you're let's
Me.
see, a few years later, so you'd have to be 1998
No, see,
is what it would be, right?
it would have been 99.
99.
And by that time, I was already in my Jesus years.
Oh,
So-
like for real.
I was youth pastor at that time. I got into the missionary thing. Didn't really start drinking beer until I lived in Ireland as a missionary for a year.
See, we can riff on your history. You're one of those people I know. Every time we talk, I learn something new about you.
No, I didn't drink beer until 2005.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you have some catching up to do.
I had some catching up. The nice thing is it didn't, like, the beer revolution didn't really pick up. The craft beer revolution didn't really pick up until about 2006, 2007. And at that point, you would have been talking about Founders, KBS is like the best beer in the world. Heady Topper, Alchemist. You know, obviously we're in Vermont, so we come from a rich culture of beer. You know, the second oldest brew pub in the world, and not the world, but in the United States.
Are you making up stuff?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
Second oldest brew pub in the United States. Vermont Pub and Brewery started here. I think Vermont's a wonderful place where we accept craft into our culture. Whether you're talking about beer or music or cheese or, you know, whatever.
Indeed. An incredible number of small, overall of businesses in Vermont are defined as small businesses. Mm-hmm. And looking back, Rock Art is celebrating their 20-year anniversary this year. They put out a 20th anniversary IPA. It's kind of a brewery that's reinventing themselves over the last year or two. They just inserted a canner into their facility in Morrisville.
How many people are canning in Vermont right now?
According to my track, we've got just over 60 breweries and just over half are canning. The latest and greatest, they're actually debuting this weekend. Who knows when you're going to hear this podcast, but December 16th, Good Measure Brewing in Northfield will be debuting cans, and they're delivering their own canner in January. Exciting for them. And just in the last month, according to my records, First Republic in now Essex are canning, and Ten Bends out of Morrisville is canning. So canning could be a whole nother riff on, but it's obviously intertwined heavily into this episode. The craft can revolution has changed the drinking game.
It has. You know, it's interesting where when I first started really drinking beer, craft beer, in 2006, it was all about the bottle. You know, and everything was about the bottle, and it was about finding whatever that flagship beer was, and most likely it was going to be an IPA, and it was probably going to be an English style IPA. Pretty floral, pretty bitter. Very interesting how far beer's come in the last 10 years.
Okay, so we got to go back. So speaking of 10 years, so we got to go back. Did you lose Jesus? How's that expression go? If you find Jesus, do you lose Jesus?
No, I think if you're a Calvinist, it's once saved, always saved. I grew up Catholic, so...
We're not going to riff on religion, just so you know, because I don't do that.
No, we're not going to do... we won't riff on religion, sex, or politics.
Oh, we can riff on sex.
Oh, we can?
Oh, yes.
All right, well, we're
That's a different conversation, and it'll be very PC, but we're not going to riff on politics or religion, because that's the easiest way to lose a listener, just like it's the easiest way to lose a friend.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wouldn't say I lost Jesus. I would say I've come to experience things in a different way, in a different light. And, you know, I mentioned before I lived in Ireland, and living in Europe really changes an American perspective.
I can imagine.
Yeah, I've lived in Haiti. I lived in Toronto. I lived in Belfast, Ireland for a year. Lived in Rwanda and Burundi. I've lived kind of all over the world and experienced some different things. So my worldview's changed a little bit over the last few years.
Underhill must seem a little timid, but perhaps that's another conversation. So, all right. So you didn't lose Jesus. You temporarily misplaced him or left him in your rearview mirror. How did you find beer or get acquainted to the beer scene?
So I found beer in Ireland.
Obviously. Hard not to.
It was Smithwick's if you're feeling thirsty and Guinness if you're feeling hungry. And so drank some Smithwick's, drank some Guinness, drank some Carlsberg, and tried the Strongbow cider. So wasn't super into alcohol before that. Really hate being hungover. So didn't really do that much. Came back to Vermont, and at that point in 2007, well, actually, went from Ireland to Asheville, North Carolina.
Oh, no.
And so...
Did you have a hard time finding beer there?
No, I didn't, actually. That was 2006, and they were already doing, like, city beer tours.
Jeez.
So it was... we were at the Asheville Brewery. We'd go and watch... Elizabeth and I would go and watch movies in their cheap seats. We watched... what did we see there? We saw a few movies.
That's another riff on. We can talk about movies.
Nacho Libre.
I've never even seen that one.
Nacho Libre.
I've not seen that one.
We did that, and then it was just drinking IPAs there, and moved back to Vermont in 2007, and kind of started homebrewing.
Homebrewing could be a riff on. I've never done it, but we'll end up talking about it anyways. Especially with Make the Cut coming up here in Vermont. So.
Yeah, I did the first Make the Cut.
Yeah, that's another conversation. We're jumping way ahead of time. We're transitioning into 8-9 years ago and 10 years ago into moving back to Vermont. So
and then just started drinking beers when I was in North Carolina. Really, I enjoy drinking Yingling, Black and Tans, and Magic Hat Roxy Rolls. Magic Hat Roxy Rolls, man, I made some delicious soups out of that. And I would just drink that because it was good and it wasn't super expensive.
Magic Hat was the first, let's say, big craft brewery that I really remember latching onto. I remember loving Blind Faith.
Yes.
I remember Blind Faith being in a very hoppy beer at like 35 IBUs. And you look at it now and almost laugh. But it's in a can right now, which I think would be the neatest thing to drink.
I've actually done that. I've done the 12-pack, the Magic Hat IPA 12-pack. So it has the high IPA, the HIPAA.
I like the high IPA, yeah.
It's got the Lucky Cat, which was one of my favorite beers for a while.
Lucky Cat, yeah.
It has the Blind Faith, and it has one other IPA in there.
Really? There's only
Encore. Has the Encore on it.
I think Magic Hat was the transition into craft beer for a lot of people. And like Sam Adams. And today actually being big news that Sam Adams has became the official beer of the Boston Red Sox.
Go Sox!
No, we're not going to talk about that right now. I'm a Yankees fan.
Go Sox!
But there are these certain breweries in the market that have, you don't want to say lost their way, but they became too big, if you will, too early in the craft beer renaissance that people lose sight of the fact that they are truly craft beer.
Well, they're innovators.
The whole industry nowadays can look back at Sam Adams,
Sierra Nevada.
I just crushed a Sierra Nevada Celebration 6-pack the other night. Sierra Nevada is still killing beers.
They're doing great. I just got their winter 12-pack, and they have a haze IPA in there that is a New England style IPA. Really good.
I'll have to look into that.
Really good. The rest of them are like so for me. But that haze IPA, like I actually just wanted a 12-pack of that.
Yeah, I'll have to look into that. But Magic Hat was definitely one of them. I mean, craft beer would not be what craft beer is today if it wasn't for some of these breweries, and they're having to essentially reinvent themselves because they are so large and so well known that people will bypass Sam Adams Boston Lager, a fantastic beer, because it was on tap everywhere 10 years ago. And it may be on tap there now, but people are looking for the next best, the latest, greatest hazy. And as a result, they're losing market share, and they're doing whatever they can. If it wasn't for the cider that Sam Adams owns, they wouldn't be probably as comfortable afloat as they are.
It's interesting. The Boston Beer Company, which is what blankets Sam Adams, actually gave the owner of Magic Hat, Al Newman, they gave him some seed money to go out and start whatever.
Alchemy and Science.
And it's interesting. Now, while I don't get into malt beverages, well, I appreciate what they are. So we're talking Twisted Teas and Smirnoff Ices and
Bitch Pops.
Mike's Hard Lemonade. Al Newman actually went out and he started Travelers, which, if you're looking for a shandy, if that's your deal, like, that they're not bad. And then he actually came out with one of the first like root beer type drinks.
Not your father's.
No, not
but
that
another...
one. He did, because Alchemy and Science did Coney Islands, and I believe Coney Island has...
And we could riff on craft beer for a while.
Well, craft beverages.
I'm not going to talk about bitch pops and malt beverages either.
Oh, well, I won't, but it was just interesting that Sam Adams was willing to support someone like Al Newman, who is a huge innovator.
Grandfather of the craft beer scene, really. And
if we're going to go we'll just rabbit trail a little bit. Al Newman, who owns Higher Ground.
Now co-owns Higher Ground, sure.
Co-owns Higher Ground right now and is really fighting hard for music in Vermont. I can, talk to some folks behind the scene, play in the local music scene.
And that's going to be a riff on episode 2. Higher Ground is the live music venue in Burlington, Vermont, in Chittenden County, really in Vermont. And I was literally there on day one. They'll be celebrating their 20th anniversary in April of 2018. Your band has played there. Band I used to travel with, currently nameless, has played there. We're definitely going to talk about Higher Ground as it goes on. But it was almost a stop because I'm really enjoying this beer. We're drinking Collective Arts Stranger Than Fiction Porter. And this is fantastic.
The Collective Arts, I got to tell you.
This may be my first from them.
They're in Canada. They're just our neighbors to the north.
Are you sure? It says Stratford, Connecticut on this.
I'm positive. Collective Arts is in Canada. They come out of Canada, out of, I believe, Ontario, someplace in Ontario. But they are fantastic in that all of their cans have original artwork.
Yes. That I'm more familiar with than their beer.
Their beer's great. They have some unbelievable... They have some really good New England-style IPAs.
New England-style IPAs. We could probably riff on that for a little while.
We probably could, and it would be interesting. If we're gonna talk about New England-style IPAs, we should get my younger brother, Dave Patterson, in here, who writes the column, the beer column for Maine Today. And who also, did you know Dave got picked up by HarperCollins for, he just wrote a novel?
I had heard rumors of that.
Yeah.
But I didn't know it was official.
But it is official. And actually, he did tell me that it got picked up by a publishing company in Israel. They're very excited in Israel about Dave's novel. So.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, that could be another conversation. We could legitimately sit and talk about beer for much too long.
Hours. Maybe days.
Perhaps. And the whole time we'd be drinking, we'd be having a good old time, we'd be stammering and stuttering, and we may lose our train of thoughts even more than we're doing now. But beer is really what brought us together. And we've shared many good beers over the last 4 or 5 years, and I've been saying to anybody that's not really into the beer scene, it's a real exciting time to be a craft beer drinker because of the abundance of music that's out there. Beer that's out there, and music. Music's another conversation, obviously. But going and shopping through the shelves nowadays is a journey. You can go in, and if you've got an open mind and a open palate, if you will, you can sit there and grab anything on the shelf, and chances are you're going to like it. Your wallet's not. That's been the tough thing about the beer scene. I remember, speaking of Magic Hat, I remember when Magic Hat beers moved up to, I want to say, $8 a six-pack. And it was like, oh, damn, I'm not going to pay $8 for a six-pack of beer. And
gladly pay $8 for a six-pack of craft beer right now.
Fast forward a couple of years when I remember really the change in the scene was after Hurricane Irene, that is.
2011, yeah.
2011, and coincidentally, the same week that hit, the Alchemist in Waterbury opened up their cannery, where they, of course, started canning the infamous Heady Topper, were suddenly demanding $72 for a case of beer. And just like that, it became the industry norm. I don't know how, but nowadays you look back at some of the breweries and you think, I'd pay $72 if I could, because some of them are demanding more than that and getting more than that. How it became norm for us to go from spending $19 on a case to $72 on a case is a little behind me, and it was a few beers ago.
It might have to do with the love that goes into the beer and the fact that a lot of these craft breweries aren't brewing, they're not brewing like hundreds of barrels of beer. I mean, at a time, unfortunately, it's, we've had, as we've worked in the Vermont beer industry in a limited, in limited capacity. Well, the beer's starting to kick in limited capacity. I think we've seen some of these smaller breweries that are brewing like really good beers that they're not able to produce the quality or the quantity. The quality's great. The quantity to keep up with demand. So you have to charge more because materials are costing more. You talk about some of the hops that people get excited about. A lot of those hops now are not available. If you get excited about barrel-aged beers, those beers are not as available because the barrels aren't. The barrels are harder to find.
Very in demand.
So you talk about, if you're just talking about hops and barrels, then a lot of the hottest beers have the proprietary hops and they have the barrel-aged beers. So if they're not brewing at capacity, at a large capacity, then you have to charge more for these beers.
And face it, it's always a matter of supply and demand, and if the crowd is going to be there paying $72 for a case, gladly, with a line, with perhaps it's a truck stop drop in a parking lot in Waterbury, or it's a 10 o'clock a.m. sale, what have you, if the lines are there, lines may be calming down a little bit in the industry, but if it's there, go with it,
Well, I would say the last 2 years have seen a real boom in just really good breweries.
There have, which has definitely helped with the lines.
The lines and the cost and the price of the beer. It's driven it down a bit.
It has. It has. There is no shortage here in Vermont, and we've been saying this for years now. As a Vermont beer drinker living in Vermont, it's an embarrassment of riches, and I'm very thankful that, due to the reputation of the beers, that we've gone beyond, as I used to say, Sean, and John, and that's
right.
Sean Lawson, Sean Hill, and John Kimmick, and that's, of course, Lawson's Finest Liquids and Hill Farmstead and The Alchemist. And people have discovered that now, let's see, we can easily go through let's say 5. We can easily say Foley Brothers and Fiddlehead and 14th Star. Little Upper Pass is killing it in the industry right now.
And one of my favorite breweries that I've discovered this year, they've been around for a bit, Bent Hill. That Imperial Blood Orange IPA has got to be the best thing in a can.
Yeah. And he's canning now. He bought his own little canning line. So then we keep on moving from there. Zero Gravities. We've just been drinking some Madonnas right now. Zero Gravity, absolutely killing it. Foam, been open for a year and a half.
And they're canning
Slam dunk. They've been canning now. 4 Quarters out of Winooski. And Brian is canning now. Fantastic beers. There's 8 right there, 9. I've already lost track. And then we've got 45 more that we can go through in some way, shape, or form and at least rattle off names. I mean, Hermit Thrush, the expansion that those guys are going under right now, massive expansion in production.
They're doing sours in a way that other people are going to wish they jumped on that bandwagon.
Absolutely. And their barrel aging program, Avery and Chris, I mean, 2 of the nicest guys I've met in this industry, killing it out of Brattleboro. Fantastic. River Roost in White River Junction.
Well, I haven't been there yet.
It's Mark's Beers. If you like hazy IPAs, Mark's Beers, you got to drink them. The aforementioned Good Measure, celebrating 1 year this Saturday. Andrew is an amazing brewer. They're killing it down there. I mean, Rock Art, 20 years in, reinventing themselves, mainly with the IPAs and the cans as of late. Lost Nation, great stuff. Ten Bends, great stuff. So there are so many great Vermont breweries, and we could riff on this for another hour.
And we will.
And we'll eventually come back to this. Yeah. We're going to run out of topics, and we'll eventually want to come, not even run out of topics, but we're going to want to come back and talk about this more. So hopefully you enjoyed this, and share this, and talk about this, and maybe you'll have learned a thing or two about the Vermont beer scene. So,
yeah.
Anything else? All right.
Good.
Awesome. I'm Eric D.
Andrew James.
Thank you for joining Riff On.